grew up in a small town tucked away in the deep swamps of southern Louisiana. It was one of those places you could drive through in less than 10 minutes and not even know you'd been there. The roads were cracked, the houses leaned on their own weight, and the cypress trees hung low over the water like tired old men. Folks here didn't have much, but they had stories that seemed to crawl up from the mud itself. And if you asked anyone what the darkest story was, the one that folks still whispered even now, decades later, they'd tell you about Mr. Collins, the Undertaker. Now, to understand Collins, you've got to understand the town itself. Death was no stranger here. Between the hurricanes, the floods, and the sickness that always seemed to sweep through when summer turned to fall, funerals were part of everyday life. Most kids around here knew what a burial looked like before they ever learned their times tables. And Collins, well, he was the man who made sure the dead were put to rest. He'd been the town's Undertaker for as long as anyone could remember. No one even knew his first name anymore. To us, he was just Collins. He was tall, thin, with a sharp nose and sunken eyes that never seemed to look straight at you, more like through you. Always wore the same black suit, even when the heat pressed down hard enough to make the air shimmer. They said he'd started out young, taking over after his own father passed. The funeral parlor was nothing more than an old 2-room shack on the edge of town, with peeling paint and a single lantern hanging out front. But people went there all the same. Didn't matter if you liked Collins or not. When death came, you had no choice but to see him. At first, folks said he was gentle with the dead. They said he handled every body with care, washing them, combing their hair, stitching up the wounds from whatever had taken them. Sometimes he even put little flowers in their hands, humming hymns as he worked. Families found comfort in that, I guess. Comfort in thinking their loved ones were treated kindly in their final hours. But there were others who said Collins lingered too long with the bodies, that he worked well past midnight, talking in low tones as if he expected the corpses to answer back. One widow swore she saw him rocking in a chair by her husband's coffin, humming the same verse over and over again until the sun rose. Another man claimed he heard laughter coming from the parlor when no one was supposed to be inside. And then there were the rumors about what he did when no one was watching. People whispered he kept pieces of the dead, locks of hair, teeth, sometimes even bones. Said he believed carrying those things gave him power. No one could prove it, of course. But in a town like ours, rumors had weight. They clung to Collins like the smell of formaldehyde clung to his clothes. I'll never forget the way he looked at people during funerals. While the rest of us bowed our heads, Collins's eyes wandered. He didn't look at the ground. He didn't look at the preacher. He looked at the families, one by one, like he was measuring them for something, like he was already imagining them on his table. Children feared him. Dogs barked when he walked by. But the strange thing was, folks still trusted him with their dead. Maybe it was necessity, maybe it was habit, or maybe, deep down, they believed what some whispered, that if Collins buried your loved one, their spirit would stay at peace. If he didn't, well, no one wanted to find out what happened then. I first heard his name when I was just a boy, sitting on my grandma's porch while the cicadas screamed in the trees. She told me never to wander near the parlor after dark. Said if Collins caught you, he'd make sure you went home with dirt under your nails and whispers in your ears. I laughed at the time, thought it was just another one of her swamp tales. But even then, I could see the way her hands shook when she spoke his name. As I grew older, I saw more of him. He was always there, at every funeral, every wake, every burial, always humming that same low hymn, the one that seemed to come from the bottom of his throat. It wasn't joyful, not sorrowful either. It was something else, something that felt like it didn't belong to the living. There's one funeral I'll never forget. It was for a little girl who'd drowned in the river. The whole town showed up, standing shoulder to shoulder under the blistering sun. Her mother was wailing so hard I thought she'd break in too. And there was Collins, standing by the coffin, one hand resting on the lid like he was holding it closed. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. His eyes were half closed, and his face looked almost pleased. I remember thinking, how could a man look pleased at a child's funeral? After that, I started noticing the way shadows seemed to bend around him, like the light didn't quite know what to do when he was near. People say a man is shaped by his work. If that's true, then Collins was shaped by death itself. For all the whispers and fear surrounding him, death still came for Collins, just like it does for us all. It happened one summer evening. Folks said he collapsed right there in his own parlor, slumped across a body he'd been preparing. A farmer who'd gone to check on his wife's arrangements found him lying cold, his face twisted into a smile that never left him. News spread fast. The Undertaker was dead. You might expect people to celebrate, to feel relief. And some did. But most of the town felt something else, something heavier. Because when you live your whole life in the shadow of a man like Collins, you start to believe he'll outlast you all. His death didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of something worse. The funeral was a strange one. Who buries the Undertaker? That was the question on everyone's lips. Sheriff Daniels finally stepped up, saying it was his duty. He and a few men from town prepared the grave in the old cemetery, the same place Collins had lowered so many others into the ground. I was there that day, standing among the crowd. The sky hung low with thick gray clouds, and the air smelled of rain, though none came. The preacher read his words, but his voice shook like the pages in his hand. Mourners shifted uneasily, not looking at each other, not looking at the coffin either. It was as if none of us wanted to be caught staring too long, afraid of what we might see. I'll never forget the sound the coffin made when they started lowering it down. It wasn't just the creak of ropes. It was heavier than that, almost like the earth itself was groaning. Sheriff Daniels muttered under his breath, swore the coffin weighed far more than it should have. That's when Collins' sister, no one even knew he had one, stepped forward. She was thin, frail, her hair the color of ash, and she said something I'll never forget. "You can seal him in the ground, but you won't keep him there." The words cut through the silence like a knife. Some gasped, others backed away, crossing themselves. The preacher hurried to finish, his voice rising with each verse. And then, with a final shudder of the ropes, Collins was gone, swallowed by the earth he'd worked beside all his life. But that wasn't the end. That very night, strange things began to happen. The Johnson family, who lived near the cemetery, reported knocks on their door at exactly 3 a.m. They opened it to find nothing, just the cold night air and the smell of fresh soil. The next morning, muddy footprints led from the cemetery gate straight to their porch. Children began waking from nightmares, screaming about a tall man standing at the foot of their beds, humming softly. One boy swore he felt dirt trickle onto his blanket, though the window was closed tight. And then there was the sheriff's wife. She woke in the middle of the night to see a figure standing in their bedroom. A tall man in a black suit, his sleeves caked with dirt, his face pale as wax. She said he leaned over her, close enough for her to smell the damp earth clinging to him. And in a voice that rasped like wind through dead leaves, he whispered, "This town isn't finished with me." By the time the sheriff lit the lamp, the figure was gone, but the room reeked of formaldehyde. Word spread fast. Families whispered that Collins had not truly left. Some said he couldn't, not after a lifetime spent with the dead. Others believed he had bound himself to the bodies he buried, tethering his soul to the very ground. A week later, a group of men went to the cemetery to check his grave. They found the earth unsettled, as though something had pushed from below. Sheriff Daniels ordered the site sealed with concrete, but even as they poured the mix, the ground trembled, as if rejecting it. After that, people avoided the cemetery. Burials grew smaller, hurried. Folks didn't linger to say their goodbyes anymore. They rushed through the prayers, lowered their dead, and left before the sun dipped below the trees. But no matter how far you ran, the humming followed. It slipped through the swamp air, low and steady, the same hymn Collins had always sung. And for me, that was when the story stopped being just a story. Because one night, walking home past the cemetery, I heard it. The same tune I'd heard him hum as a child, the same verse he'd sung while preparing bodies. It rose from the ground itself, weaving through the mist, wrapping around my bones until I couldn't breathe. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs, and for the first time, I knew Collins wasn't gone. He was waiting. It was around that time that a group of teenagers decided to test their luck. You know how it goes. Every town has its legends, its dares. And ours had Collins. There were 4 of them, 2 boys, 2 girls. They snuck into the cemetery one humid night, carrying flashlights and a bottle of whiskey. Their laughter carried through the swamp as they joked about the curse, daring each other to touch the grave, to call out Collins's name. Only 3 came back. The story spread like wildfire. The survivor, a boy named Michael, wasn't right after that night. He said they'd been sitting by Collins's grave, passing the bottle, when the humming began. At first, they thought it was one of them playing a trick. But then the ground shifted beneath their feet, soft and sinking, like something was crawling upward. The air grew cold, the fog thickened, and then they saw him. A tall figure rising from behind the grave, his suit tattered, his sleeves black with soil. His skin was pale, sagging, his eyes dark pits that caught the moonlight just enough to gleam. And he smiled, that same crooked smile everyone remembered. Michael swore the Undertaker reached for them with hands too long, fingers stained with dirt. The girl screamed and ran, pulling him with her. But the other boy, he froze. He stood there trembling as Collins leaned close, whispering something no one else heard. By the time they looked back, their friend was gone. The sheriff found him 2 days later, lying on top of Collins's grave. His mouth was filled with soil, his eyes open wide, staring at nothing. No one in town questioned the curse after that. Life unraveled quickly. Farmers stopped working their fields past sundown. The church filled every Sunday with prayers louder than hymns, desperate cries begging God to take the shadow away. But no prayer could wash out the smell of formaldehyde that drifted through the town at night. No scripture could drown out the humming that followed us home, seeping into our walls, curling into our dreams. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was all in my head, but the truth has a way of finding you, even when you close your eyes. One evening, walking home, I cut through the old path by the cemetery. The fog was thick, the air heavy. I kept my head down, steps quick. But then it came, the humming, low and steady, drifting from the gravestones. My heart raced. I told myself not to look, just keep walking. But my eyes betrayed me, and that's when I saw him. A figure by the fence, tall and thin, his suit clinging to him like wet fabric. His sleeves dripped with soil, his face pale, stretched into that crooked smile. His eyes met mine, hollow and endless. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then his lips parted, and though no sound reached me, I saw the words clearly. "You'll help me next." I don't remember running home. I don't remember bursting through the door, my mother's screams as she saw me covered in dirt. All I remember is the cold, clinging to me like I'd just climbed out of the grave myself. From that night on, I knew Collins wasn't finished. Not with me, not with the town. Because once the Undertaker had you in his sight, you belonged to him. The days after I saw Collins at the cemetery were a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every sound became his humming. Every shadow stretched too long. I stopped walking past the church, stopped glancing toward the cemetery at all. But even avoiding him didn't help, because Collins wasn't confined to the cemetery anymore. He was in the walls of my house, in the corners of my room, in the pauses between my breaths. I would close my eyes at night, and there he was, sitting at the foot of my bed, dirt dripping onto the floorboards, his smile never faltering. I prayed. God knows I prayed harder than I ever had in my life. But prayers don't work when the devil himself is listening. One night, I woke to a scratching sound. Slow, deliberate. I thought maybe it was a branch against the window, but when I turned, I saw soil spilling from the cracks in my wall. The wood itself was splitting, as if the earth had found its way inside. And then came the humming. I sat frozen as Collins's figure began to take shape right there in my room. His outline bled from the dirt, shoulders hunched, suit ragged. His smile stretched wider than before. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His presence said everything. I remember screaming, but my voice felt swallowed before it left my throat. The next thing I knew, I was outside, barefoot in the cold night air, standing in the middle of the street. My neighbors told me they'd seen me walking, eyes open but empty, dirt smeared across my face like a mask. They said I was humming. The town was unraveling faster now. Chickens stopped laying eggs. Wells turned sour overnight. Even the sheriff, the one man who swore he feared nothing, packed up his family and left before dawn without saying goodbye. But I couldn't leave. Collins didn't just haunt me. He tethered me. Every time I tried to pack, to think of leaving, something pulled me back. Doors would slam shut. The roads would fog so thick you couldn't see a foot in front of you. It was as though the town itself had been claimed, marked as his ground. I started hearing stories that people outside our parish had begun whispering about us. They called it the cursed town, said no one should come near. But legends attract the curious, and one night, a pair of outsiders showed up, 2 men with cameras, calling themselves investigators. I watched from my porch as they marched confidently into the cemetery, mocking the stories, laughing at our fear. I never saw them leave, but the next morning, their cameras were found by the gate. The footage, well, no one talks about it, but I saw a frame once, just one. It showed the 2 men standing before Collins's grave, their faces slack, their eyes rolled back white. Behind them, barely visible, was Collins himself, one hand on each of their shoulders, smiling into the lens. After that, no one from outside came again. I thought maybe, just maybe, Collins had what he wanted. But then the dreams began. Every night, I found myself in the same place, standing at the edge of an open grave. Inside, a coffin waited, its lid cracked. I would look down, and Collins's pale hand would reach up, curling around my wrist, pulling me closer. And always, just before I fell, I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my sheets soaked with dirt. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. My body thinned out. My skin grew pale. Friends whispered that I was beginning to look like him. Then, one evening, I found something waiting on my porch. A suit. Black, pressed, the kind an Undertaker would wear. My size exactly. And pinned to the lapel was a small card. It's almost time. That night, I didn't fight sleep. I let it come. The dream was the same, standing at the edge of the grave. But this time, I didn't resist. Collins was there, waiting inside the coffin. He looked at me with those hollow eyes, that terrible smile, and he extended his hand. I took it. For the first time, I felt peace. Cold, deep, eternal. It wrapped around me like a shroud. When I woke, I was lying in the cemetery, stretched across Collins's grave. The sheriff was gone, but a few neighbors had dragged me back, whispering that I shouldn't be alive. They said I had no pulse when they found me. Yet here I am, speaking to you, breathing. But I don't feel alive. I feel like something is waiting, pressing against the edges of me, like soil ready to collapse into an open hole. At night, when the house is silent, I hear my own voice humming. His hymn, not mine. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the mirror, and for a split second, it isn't me staring back. It's him. I don't know how long I can keep fighting. Maybe by the time you hear this, it'll already be too late. Maybe Collins has finally claimed me, and this voice you're listening to isn't mine at all. Maybe it never was. So if you're passing through this part of Louisiana, and you hear a hymn carried on the wind, low and steady, don't stop. Don't look back. Because once the Undertaker smiles at you, there's no leaving. You'll be next.